Welcome to Behind the Build. I'm your host, Jonathan Jacobs, and today I have with me a non-architect, a non-interior designer, someone that is not directly involved in the design, but actually does design. Oh, that's weird. Today I have with me Brooke Guzar from Blackwell Structural Engineers. Brooke, thank you for joining.
Oh, it's such a pleasure to be here, Jonathan. Thank you for having me. As a non-architect, as a non-designer, engineer, or constructor, it's just really cool to be part of the design community and share what it's like to be a structural engineer.
Yeah, well, we're gonna. I don't want to get it all into it. So for anyone listening that doesn't know, Brooke is the newly appointed as of 2023. It was March 2023.
It was January 2023.
January 2023. Yeah. Newly appointed CEO of Blackwell Structural Engineers.
First one ever. We've never had a CEO.
And what an incredible thing to be able to have you on, because I say you as the collective you from Blackwell, have your name on probably some of the most significant, challenging structures built across Canada and some into the US. So what better person to have on than the first ever CEO for Blackwell Structural Engineers?
Yeah, it's wild when I think about like Blackwell as a contributor to the community.
Yeah,
you walk around Toronto where many of our projects are, and you can kind of point out like, oh, there's a Blackwell one, that's a Blackwell one. We work with this architect on that we had this challenge in this one, and to see the things that you have contributed to be built and people using them and know that they're safe and good and exciting and beautiful it's so satisfying.
So I want to provide some really brief background on really how amazing Brooke is. I met Brooke literally last week, and I was recommended in chatting with her from Dave. And so the exciting thing and first time chatting with Brooke last week was we sat down inside the office. I just walked in because that's who I am, and I said, "Is Brooke here?" And when you eventually came in, we sat down and we had like a almost 40-minute chat. And it kind of felt like we had known each other for quite some time because we had so many similar interests through life. And I want to touch on a lot of that through the course of this discussion today. So with all of that said, Brooke is also CEO of the company, and Brooke is 38 years old. To be CEO, first CEO ever at 38 of a really well-established structural engineering company is a pretty amazing thing.
It's unbelievable. It's like, it's such an honor first to step up and serve a company I care deeply about. Like Blackwell is just a community that I just love so much. I love what we do. I love how we do it. I love how we empower each other to do these really difficult and creative things, and in a way that is all about the success of the project, of the values of that project, and that high level of engagement and that high level of trying to tackle difficult problems, design problems, instead of saying, oh no, that seems too hard, we can't do that. It's like, oh, maybe we can do this, we can figure this out. And it's the most creative job I've ever had.
So let's talk about that and where it kind of started, because when you told me this last week, I was just kind of sitting at the edge of my seat and like really just like taking it all. Like this is a really cool story for anyone that's about to hear this for the first time. If you're driving, turn it up. If you're sitting at home, tell everybody else to leave you alone for a few minutes, because it's a really cool story. So go ahead, and Brooke, tell your story of like how you got to this point of your life.
Oh,
I know that
it's huge, but I mean I can boil it down to the main parts. I guess I grew up on a boat traveling the Great Lakes with my parents, and that exposed me to sort of forces and things. You get a real good sense of forces in engineering because our boat would break down all the time, and my dad would say, hey, Brooke, you come and hold the light. And so I started tinkering at a really young age and being quite curious about the world, the built world. How does it work? Why does it work? I thought about going into architecture eventually, but recognized, no, I don't want to make things look awesome. I want to make them stand up. And so I chose structural engineering. I went to McMaster in Hamilton, where I'm from, and I just loved exploring the intensity of design. Met a lot of amazing people too. And at one point throughout those 4 years of school, I got pointed to Blackwell's website. And it was like just this mind-blowing portfolio of beautiful things. And like the collection of interesting things, of beautiful things, of these photographs that were just inspiring. Was like, whoa, could I actually design things like that? Like I didn't really know what it was, but I just recognized that Blackwell was different. They just had this beautiful portfolio. And so I said, I'd love to work at Blackwell. At the same time, I wasn't the best student. And so I had this thing of like, oh, obviously Blackwell is full of incredibly smart and talented people. And I'm, just the student, and I'm not the best. I failed a course or two and learned a lot through that experience. But so I had this story in my head that I wasn't smart enough for Blackwell. I didn't belong at Blackwell. I couldn't work there. Yeah. And so I went and wandered out and did some other things. I worked in the bridge industry at a little company in Burlington for a while. I was there for about 5 years, and that was coming to an end. The company was changing a little bit. It wasn't exactly what I wanted to do anymore. And I was thinking about Blackwell. So as I was contemplating possibly leaving this company, I was at a family Thanksgiving dinner, and I was talking a little bit about the job I was in and what I was thinking. And I had mentioned this company named Blackwell in Toronto, this amazing company that I would love to work for. And at the time I was a self-absorbed 21-year-old. I had no idea what my family members' jobs were, what they did. And my cousin Corey, he pipes up and he says, Brooke, I'm a principal at Blackwell. And I had no idea. And so it's like, oh my gosh, you do amazing things. And so we got to chatting, and he said, come on in for an interview. And I interviewed with Corey and Ian, who are principals at Blackwell, been there forever. Yeah. And you're sitting with them and you're in awe, right? The way that they speak about engineering, the way that they understand it, that you look at drawings and you are able to engage in a way with them. And it was wonderful to meet them. At the time, they couldn't hire me. A couple projects fell out. And I ended up moving to Sudbury to go work in the mining industry with a good friend and build a business up in Sudbury for Worley Parsons, a massive company, 43,000 people worldwide. And Sudbury, it wasn't my first choice of places to live. I said I'd move up there for 2 years and see how it went. And I ended up staying for 6, and I loved it. I got to be underground doing all these big, messy projects, like big machines, like pumping and piping and plumbing. And just, I learned so much about mechanical engineering and electrical engineering and construction and conveying materials and sort of in these really loud, dangerous environments. And made some great friends up there and built a business. We started out, it was just the two of us really, and then grew it to 12 people at some point. The manager there, who was responsible for everything, he ended up getting a different role. And so he moved on, and I took over the office and continued on with the business. And at one point, I decided that I'd love to go over to the owner's side and see what that looked like. So I went and worked in the plant as an owner's representative, working with a bunch of different engineers, and all working with a bunch of different consultants, coordinating the projects instead of doing them. Anyways, time went on, and at some point I decided I needed some time off. I was going to take a decent chunk of time off, and I spoke with the company. I was like, I'm going to take 7 months off. Is that okay? And I was ready to walk if they said no. And they said, sure, Brooke, no problem. And so I started planning this big adventure. And someone had asked me, like, hey, Brooke, if you had 6 months left to live, what would you do? And I said, out of nowhere, having never ridden a motorcycle in my life, I said, well, I'd ride a motorcycle across Canada. And so that's what I did. I went and got my license. I got a little bike to get started and learn on, and started planning this big adventure across Canada. And I worked for that year leading up to the trip. And as the 7 months approached, I got a bike. I strapped a tent and a sleeping bag to it and a GPS. And
what kind of bike was it?
It was a BMW F700 GS, which is like an adventure bike. So it's like but this thing is massive. It's like 800 pounds. I can't pick this thing up. And I've never ridden bikes before, so I'm head to toe safety gear. Like, I spent just as much money on safety gear as the bike. No one can tell I'm a woman. And I fall over all the time on the road. And people would come and help me pick it up and be like, yo, dude, you need help? I'd be like, yes, please. Be like, oh my God. And it was nuts. It was just like, I took off, and it took me 5 days to get out of Ontario because it's massive and beautiful.
It's funny is that I don't think most people understand, like, and this is not to take away from your story at all. One of the things my father always said was, travel your own country first before you go see the world, because the beauty and the majestic views you get out of Canada can't be compared globally.
And the different kinds of views. So like Ontario's forests and rocks and beautiful winding roads and really, really big. And then you hit the prairies, and everything is dominated by the sky, right? Like, you're just this small little thing and the sky. And it's a really humbling feeling and an inspiring one at the same time. And then as you soon approach the mountains, it shifts, right? Your whole landscape is now dominated by the mountains, and the sky is small, and you feel so small and tiny again, and you're just this, soul on a motorcycle. I was experiencing really interesting things, meeting people all over that want to know your story. They see you alone on a motorcycle in a restaurant eating and say, hey, is that your bike? And you get to meet them and talk about them. And sometimes I met some people one gentleman named Sandy, I ended up riding with him for 7 days. This guy was amazing. He was like 64 or something and showed me all the best routes. And then he helped plan the route down through Montana. And it was just an incredible time.
And you said you had the breakdown too.
Oh yeah,
small little town,
tiny town, and I think might have been Saskatchewan or Manitoba. But it was the end of the day. I was super excited about my next campsite, and I wasn't paying attention. And I put diesel in my gas motorcycle, and the attendant at the gas station came running out. She said, "Whoa, whoa, whoa, that's diesel!" And I just filled the tank. It was full of diesel now, and so I was like, I don't know what to do here. I couldn't. There's no drain for the tank. I had the service manual for the bike, so I knew what I could do to fix it and everything, but it's just like, I don't know how to do this. Anyways, this tiny town folded in, like 5 dads showed up and were like, oh, we can help you figure this out. And so we all worked together to determine a way to rig up the pump to eject the fuel when we cranked it for starting, as it was a fuel injected system, and like learned so much about that. And I wanted to thank them. They wouldn't take any money or anything. They just sent me on my way with a phone number for the next town of someone who's a mechanic who could check out the bike if we needed. And and I've never seen those people again. And they forever have impacted my life.
Right.
And that community of wanting to see you succeed on an adventure is really cool.
I mean, as you told me a portion of the story when we first met last week, and that was, to me, I'm like, it makes complete sense while you're helping run this company. Like it makes complete sense. The ability to be able to go and take on a new adventure, and to be able to go into communities of the unknown and connect with people, even though you're in a completely vulnerable position.
Yeah.
It takes
guts,
it
courage.
Takes guts. I'm gonna use a slang Yiddish term. It's called chutzpah. It takes chutzpah to be able to do that. Also, so sorry. So go ahead. So you finished your trip.
So we ended up finishing the trip, and I got back home, and my mom was really thankful to see me because she was quite nervous the whole time.
Yeah.
And this was a while ago. Like, we didn't have, there was no air tags or anything. So she was tracking me through a phone, which would kind of sometimes glitch out. And I'd call her nearly every day and just check and make sure she was all right. And my dad was happy to see me too. And I got back and I was like, what am I going to do now about career? I started thinking about, what do I want? What do I want to do? One of my biggest fears in life is wasting time. And I was at this profound crossroads that part of what had inspired this trip was a deep, deep loss. And when you lose something so near and dear to you, you end up feeling devastated, but you get to pick what you build back. And so I was really in this mode of designing my life. What do I want to build back when you have this really devastated terrain? Mm-hmm. And what a privilege to be able to think like that. And, what do I want to do? Yeah. And so I was dragging my feet. I don't want to go back to Sudbury. And I was like, I think I need a change. And so I was at my cousin Corey and Becky's house at Christmas time or so. And I was like, I don't want to go back to Sudbury. And Corey said, well, what about Halifax? And I was like, oh, that sounds great. And he's like, Blackwell, we got an office out there, but it needs reinvigoration. There isn't anyone there right now. What do you think? And I was like, sounds like a great adventure. And so a week or two later, I got this phone call from Dave Bowick, this like famous structural engineer. Like, you see his name in the textbooks I read about structural engineering, and he's calling my cell phone. So I pick up the phone like, hello, Mr. Bowick, all nervous. And he's like, hey, Brooke, in his classic Dave way. It's just so disarming and so welcoming. And he said, I'd love to have a beer with you. Come on in. So I walked into our building at 134 Peter Street, which is a stunning, amazing building that sort of encapsulates intense creativity involved in structural engineering. If you get a chance, go to 134 Peter Street and just stand in the atrium in awe. We didn't design the building, unfortunately. But
this is legitimate. I walked into the atrium of this building and I was like, they're in here? This is a big deal. Yeah. This is a structure.
There's a story behind how we ended up there too, but so I walk in and I'm just like, oh my gosh, could if I joined Blackwell, like, could I possibly design a structure like this? And sort of that old story was kicking back in. And when you meet Dave, he's just so inviting and warm and curious about you, and obviously deeply intelligent, and just one of those people who's a deeply compelling person. And we hung out for what I recall being a couple hours, which I now know is a gift. You don't get Dave Bowick for a couple hours. And we talked about all sorts of things. And one of the things I told him was like, hey, Dave, I'm not a very good engineer. I've been working in project management, people management for the past 10 years. I went through school and I passed. I said, that's great. That's all we need. Brooke, you've got the nuts and bolts and we can teach you those, the ones you need. But we can't always teach people some of the skills that you might have. And we'd love to have you join us and prop up our Halifax office and go out there and hang out with our friends that we got out there and see what you can do. And it was amazing to now complete the story of, oh my gosh, the company that I didn't belong to, I now belong to. And so that I'm forever endeared to them for helping me rewrite that story, especially now as I'm running the company. And so I moved out to Halifax and was there for 6.5 years, sort of built a business. We already had several projects, got to be involved in Dalhousie doing some teaching, which was such a dream. I never thought I'd be able to teach. And put my head down and learned how to be a pretty good engineer. And which was its own type of stress.
Which is just also humbling in the way that you said that.
Yeah.
Pretty good.
I'm definitely not the brightest engineer in the box, but I'm reasonably practical and creative. And I love solving problems.
Yeah.
And now in my new role as CEO, I'm not solving structural engineering problems. I'm working on people challenges, organizational challenges.
Yeah.
And what a better way to give back to a company that taught me so much about being an engineer, that took a gamble and hired me in ways and has now taken another not drastic, but just another adventurous turn and saying, hey, we're going to find a CEO in our own ranks. We've never had a CEO. We don't know what we're doing, but we know you're all talented. So apply.
And that, to me, this is also one of the really cool details about the company. And that is that they put the call out internally rather than externally.
Yeah.
And
it's
a forward way of thinking.
Yeah. And it was such a Blackwellian memo. I remember reading it and just being so deeply proud and moved by the openness, the innovation, the freedom, the autonomy, the objectivity in it. Just saying, like, we don't know how to do this, but we trust all of you. So let's talk about it.
And playing into that same dialogue is, I was just actually talking to someone this morning about this, and how you're also one of the first companies that allowed people to work remotely prior to the pandemic.
Yeah, we had a couple of folks who had moved out or moved to Montreal, or even myself in Halifax. I was really a remote employee in a way. It was only me out there for a while. And just Blackwell, like, they find great people that they want to hang out with, and then they empower them to achieve whatever they might be interested in.
And capable of that they might not have thought that they were capable of.
Yeah, that's true. Like, they give you a shot, right?
Yeah.
And even if you were to miss a mark, if you knew that whatever that mark might be, like, they're just going to say, what'd you learn? What do we do now? And so to go through the process of CEO, and I remember debating the choice was difficult. At the time, I was in a really stressful project, and I was having a hard time with the stress of structural engineering, the difficulty of, like, you got to get it right. I was doing this really complicated design. And when the memo came out, and I thought immediately, I was like, whoa, this is wild. And this will change the trajectory of Blackwell. And whoever stepped into this role, I will absolutely support them. And it's going to make the next generation of Blackwellians. Like, what this person does is going to be for the people that come after them. And we got this amazing community of 60 people, pretty organic growth. I kind of looked around one day and was like, oh, we're 60 people now. We should maybe do something different. But who were deeply committed to our core of what we are and our values around doing great work, enabling your peers and using good judgment, autonomy, freedom, flexibility, commitment, engagement. Those are some of the words that can quickly roll off the tongue of any Blackwellian.
Yeah.
And I think clients alike too. And so when the memo came out, and I said, wow, it would be an honor just to go through the process. If I could put some ideas forward that maybe make sense or maybe not, if I can just try, that would be very cool. Process was 5 months long. We had several applicants which felt like pretty good engagement. And I was studying on the side of how do you run a business? How do you be a CEO? I knew I had parts of leadership that were sort of built in, but I didn't know how to be a CEO. And I was just a pretty good structural engineer. And you're still doing your day job. Like all this was done sort of on the side. And so you're nervous and you're trying to think about it. Like, and it was a gamble too, in some senses. For me, I loved my life in Halifax. I loved the people I was working with. I loved the friends I had found, the loves I had made, and my little cute apartment and my 7-minute walk to work. And it was just a really peaceful life. And I knew if I did get the job, I'd have to move back to Toronto. And I put in my application. That's where our main office is. So anyways, 5 months later, grueling process. It was the interview was 8 hours long with 9 people.
Just like, hold on, before you move on to the next, I'm going to say that again. An 8-hour interview with 9 people.
Yeah.
That's one more person than there were hours.
That's true.
Okay.
My
math is sound on that one.
And it was a process designed by Blackwell. Like they had made a nominating committee, and then that solicited applications for the role. And then they had a CEO selection committee that was made up of people all across Blackwell that represented different levels of leadership and perspectives. And so it was this group of people who, as a whole, we could all sort of put our arms around Blackwell and understand it, and then have these discussions that were really fun and really meaningful. That it wasn't like high consequence or high pressure. It was just like a really cool conversation focused on the operations of Blackwell instead of focused on structural engineering. It's like, where are we? Where do we want to go? What does this look like? And just a chance to be creative. And the several different people who applied had different platforms around a focus on financial performance or governance or project work, business development. Mine was really focused on culture. It was around, I love the Blackwell culture. So why I want to work here, why I want to work here forever. And I just wanted to underpin and empower that. And realistically, we're nothing if we don't have people, right? Blackwell is our people, our big, beautiful brains. Just a bunch of amazing, sweet nerds. And those meaningful relationships that we've built over years with all the architecture community.
Sweet nerds.
Yeah, they're just beautiful. I love them all. And to that point, it's like, I genuinely care for everyone I work with. I really like everyone I work with. Yeah. That's a pretty cool gift.
Yeah. I mean, just to add to that, I mean, I'll provide my own anecdote when I had met with you last week. And as we're sitting there in the foyer of the office and people are walking by, I know that the company is not like, it's not massive that you have thousands of people, but as every single individual person walks by, it's all hi by the first name, and there's an engagement that happens back and forth. And the reason that I say that is because there is, and it exists across many businesses in many workplaces, where people of a certain stature do not engage in conversations with people that are of a different level. They just don't.
Yeah.
And so I will say that as a testament to what Blackwellians are and what you embody is that connection to culture and engaging in the basics of a hello with every single person.
Yeah.
And it was really, for me, as a brand new person to the office, I noticed that immediately.
Yeah, it feels really welcoming and warm.
It's completely
exciting.
Yeah.
I was walking in the office yesterday and popped by a younger person's desk. 2 of them were sitting there working on something cool, a cool looking SolidWorks model. I was like, hey, what are you all working on? And they just walked me through what they were doing. We talked about it. I was like, oh, is there some big torque here? And how do you manage that? And it was just super neat to engage with them. And that has always been Blackwell. I remember when I first joined Blackwell, I sat beside Dave Bowick, and I could see him doing engineering. I could see him on the phone talking about calls and being like, and saying things like, oh, I'm not sure about that. Or I'm going to dig into that. That sounds really exciting. And to have that ability to go speak with the people who you admire, who you look up to, and recognize that they see you as a peer is just so cool.
Yeah.
And so the interview process was wild and really exciting. It took me like 2 days to recover. I was exhausted. And a couple weeks go by and we ended up learning that they would tell all the candidates the next day. And I didn't sleep that night. And I didn't know what I wanted the answer to be. I didn't know if I wanted it to be yes or no, but I just knew that I was so grateful for the chance. And they called me and they said, hey, Brooke, and it was Ian. It was Ian and Jessica who called me. So Ian, who had interviewed me all those years before.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah. Said, like, we're thrilled to tell you, Brooke, that it's you. We're offering you the role of CEO. And I don't remember if I laughed or cried first, but I did both at the same time probably. And it was just such a moment of, oh my God, my life is about to change so drastically. And just...
In this moment right now in front of me, Brooke is holding her hands over her face and like covering her eyes and like reliving that moment. And part of what I have continued to say on this podcast, and one of the reasons why I do not believe in video, is because I like to describe it as what I see, and the pure joy over your face as you're talking about this, and also living it. It's a beautiful thing. Sorry, continue.
Just such a defining moment where you don't know what's going to happen next, but you know it's going to be different, and it's scary, and it's big, and it's thrilling, and it's sort of everything all at once.
Yeah, and you're about to define what's going to happen next.
Yeah. And you start calling people to say, oh my gosh, I got the job. And they were like, and so many folks are just like, you're going to be amazing. This is so cool, bro. Great job. And and then you start thinking, okay, well, I got to drive across the country. What am I going to do with my stuff? Where am I going to live? What's this going to all look like? And you're a beginner again. You're new. You're on a new journey that's super exciting and just so different. And so I moved to Toronto in February. Terrible month to move to Toronto. It's pretty gloomy. And jumped into the role.
Lucky if you get sun.
It was awful. So it was just so many transitions all at once. It was saying goodbye to a life I truly loved. I had a partner there, and she was going to stay in Halifax, and we'd do the long distance thing, which was difficult. So I'm moving to a city that is quite a lonesome city in ways. A lot of my friends had moved out of the city and into this new job that is uncertain, undefined, no precedent. There's no mentor. There's no coach who's saying, hey, here's how we do this. So the chance to shape and build a role, knowing that would impact so much at Blackwell, what an honor. And yeah, it was tough transitions all at once. And so I think one of those things that, I've been more agile in my younger life of embracing change, but at 37 at the time, it was a lot of things.
Yeah.
And then someone had said in the beginning, like, oh, Brooke, it's the loneliest job you'll have. I was like, no, it's fine. I won't feel lonely at Blackwell. But God, I felt so lonely. It's like
at the beginning
and not as much now. Like I feel very deeply connected to everybody, but ultimately I am accountable for everything. I'm not necessarily responsible for everything, but I'm accountable for everything. And so the choices I make or the decisions I make impact 60 people's lives.
Actually more than that.
Yeah, their families, their friends, their lives, where they live, what they choose to do, what their work is like. Sorry not to add more pressure, but yeah, there's a lot. And so,
in most cases, it's a minimum of probably about 120 or more.
Yeah, and just the honor of, just the gravity of stepping into this position that just totally changed the story I had in my head about I don't belong, because I do.
Yeah.
And
it seems like you belong way more than you thought you did.
Probably more than I thought I did, right? And
probably better than okay.
I think so.
Or maybe better than pretty good.
I'm not sure. You'll have to ask Dave.
I will.
But I've been in the role now just a year and a half, and the company, from speaking with others, feels different in a positive way. We were really looking at what makes us Blackwell and harnessing that and deepening that and saying, okay, well, great, we love that parts of Blackwell, but we're this like big, we're kind of messy in some ways. Scrappy. I'll call it scrappy, but we're 60 people. Like there's a level of maturity that you kind of need. We have great relationships. We have amazing projects. We have fantastic people working at Blackwell. We have a city that we can contribute to and shape. Those are great places to start. And then it's working on other things like, okay, well, what do our policies look like? Are we empowering all of our people? Are we taking good care of folks? Are we being generous? Can we give back to the community in other ways? What do we want to do? We're always going to do structural engineering, but like, what if we look at it in a little bit of a different way? Where is the world going? And that's sort of where I'm trying to look. But at the same time, it's, sometimes we just need some organization to things, someone to think about it. We all love being engineers, but it's someone needs to think about those tough problems and figure them out and direct the traffic around them. So I think I'm really good at that. I think I'm good at executing. And I think Dave is such a visionary. He's got that big, exciting vision. I think he's so deeply embedded in our culture and has created it. And for me, it's so easy to hold those principles near and dear to my heart because they align so well, and then to execute and make things happen. And like, we've just done tremendous things, Jonathan, over the last year and a half. In so many ways, we've had an unprecedented year of amazing projects that are being built. Financially, we had our best year in history as well. And we've rolled out some awesome enabling policies. We've done so many things.
I want to talk a little bit about like some of the design and what that can be. But I think that one of the other truly remarkable things about what you had mentioned to me and David mentioned to me in advance of our discussion was one of the big things you changed for employees.
Mm-hmm.
And this is in a year and a half of you being at the helm. So go ahead.
One of the things, if you ask any Blackwellian who's been around for a long time, we have people who've been around quite a while. They say, yeah, Blackwell's always talked about an employee share ownership program. But it talked about it, but wasn't able to make it happen. It's quite an undertaking, a big thing. And so that was one of the main seeds of needing a CEO, was they wanted and launched the employee share ownership program, but we need a CEO to get there. We need governance. We need an active board. We need all this structure to actually just do that thing. And so that was sort of the North Star for the years. Like, I want to do that thing. I want us to be employee owned. We all work really hard. Everybody should enjoy that. And so it was just about a month, probably a little over a month ago, that we officially launched the employee share ownership. So we've reorganized our unanimous shareholders agreement, rewritten that, and built the policy, figured out, what does this actually look like? What does it look like? How do you be generous in an ESOP, an employee share ownership program? How can we make this no burden on others here? Just give them a gift, really, in some ways, and say, okay, then the mechanics of all of it, happy to talk with anyone who's curious about it. But we did it in a way that's just so, we feel is very accessible and really underpins our interest in generosity and sharing. It's just cool to say, like, Blackwell is employee owned in lots of ways. Yeah. I think that's probably one of the things I'm most proud of. We also did an acquisition. We also restructured leadership. I was
waiting for you to.
We
go
did
to the
so many other things.
And what was that like?
Oh my gosh, this was at a time when it was an interesting time. There was a bit of an industry slowdown. We were feeling our projects a little lighter, and we were really having a lot of difficult conversations around leadership and contributions and sorting out, how does the CEO slot into this? What does it look like? And there was And then in the middle, I think it was like a Thursday night, Dave texted me and he's like, got a cool opportunity. Let's talk. And it's like, I don't know if I could take on more. And he said, we have a chance for an acquisition. When we've been talking with this other company for many years about, sort of joking about, Blackwell should buy us out one day. And so the board and Dave and everybody looked at the deal, and I was like, nope, no way. I'm not doing this. We've got too much on the go. But it was just too exciting to say no. And so I quickly looked in and just like, we got to do this. What an amazing opportunity to enhance our knowledge, our portfolio. And so we acquired Odrvik Engineering, and they just very similar philosophies. We basically joined gangs with another group of beautiful nerds. And it's so cool.
And continue to nerd out.
Yeah, and continue to nerd. Like, honestly, we were in meetings talking about the acquisition, and we get derailed by talking about structural things. It's like, okay, everybody, we got to focus on this. So I've learned to work with lawyers and draw up contracts and acquisition agreements and accountants and stuff. Like, I've just learned so much in the last year, and never did anyone say, well, we can't do that. It's like, we don't know how, but we'll figure it out. And I think that's really, really cool. I think it's tremendous, and it's just a really wonderful thing to have Odrvik in our office with their expertise around heritage and adaptive reuse. It's a space we really want to be in. And so I think some of these projects are pretty big projects, and they all happened in a year and a half.
I would say they're pretty big.
Yeah, I think they're pretty big. Yeah.
Not small.
And finding my feet in Toronto too, and
a new environment,
a new environment, a new routine.
people.
new people, changes in my, my own life and sort of struggling with that, the challenge with the transition into a role that is really, really big.
Yeah. And demanding.
Yeah. It's super demanding. And I don't think being a CEO at Blackwell is like being a CEO of a really big corporation or anything. It's I feel grateful. I feel there's lots of freedom and flexibility still for me. There's lots of opportunity to focus in on things that I really like. There's so many things we could do. But even if we didn't change anything, like Blackwell's still awesome as it is. It's like, what a great place to be CEO. I would never want to be going to do a turnaround somewhere else or, yeah.
Yeah, you're not asking for 7 months off to go find yourself
on
a sailing adventure this time?
Not yet. Next year I recently joined I applied to be part of this motorcycle group. It's an all women's motorcycle club that does expeditions all across the world. And I applied and they accepted me. And so in 2025, I'm going to Guatemala in January to ride motorcycles.
Wow.
With a bunch of women I've never met from all over the world. And then in December 2025, I'm doing Patagonia. And so it's bookending the year.
I don't feel like you told me about
Probably not. No.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
So that'll bookend the year for 2025. And that'll be my third year as CEO and sort of like a chance to, just go do something else that I love. And
do they have all the equipment? They have everything.
We rent bikes. Yeah.
In these regions, like they've.
Yeah, they rent bikes and it's all off the road, like off-roading.
Yeah.
And camping or like very small, off the beaten path accommodations and things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I assume everyone's got intercoms. Everyone's on.
Yeah.
Just for anyone that doesn't know this, and I apologize that if this is a conversation you're not overly interested in, then you can turn me down right now for the next maybe 15 seconds. But and when you're driving a motorcycle, sometimes you might see someone with a flashing light on the side of their helmet, and that's their comms unit to be able to talk when you're in when you're riding with multiple people. But those comm units also have a range for connectivity. And so if you ever ride in a group and you happen to be riding in a group with people that are faster than you and you're slower, or vice versa, it is very easy once you're beyond 2 kilometers to lose communication.
Yeah.
And it starts beeping. I say this only because I was on a trip with some buddies and they were flying around the Gatineau Lakes and they were driving like really fast, like uncomfortably fast. And I could not do that. And so I was like literally by myself for like a day of touring through the Gatineau Lakes, listening to this beeping in my ear until eventually I got in range again. And I'd be like, they'd be like, "Are you close?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'm finally in range, guys. I'm 2 kilometers back."
It's so wild.
It's such an incredible experience to be able, for anyone that thinks about this. And I know that, yes, this is supposed to be a podcast about all the other things that relate to design, but just on the specifics of motorcycle culture, there's something very special about being able to put your feet down on the road that you're traveling. Mm-hmm. It is completely different than driving in a car. A lot of people have preconceptions about what it is to be on a motorcycle, but there is a freeness to it that you don't get in many other things. And it also allows you to completely dial in on what you're doing and not think about many other things that can go on through your mind while you're driving in a car.
Yeah.
You have to be focused on what's happening on the road.
It's like you're in it.
Yeah. Small little things can have an impact.
Yeah.
So, sorry, that was long in 15 seconds. You can turn me back up now.
Well, maybe. It's just like it ties back to leadership too. So applying for this, I like to call it a motorcycle gang. They're looking at things. You have to check off several boxes of like, what can you contribute as an individual? Are you a leader? Are you second in command? Are you a navigator? Are you a videographer? Are you a cook? Are you a mechanic?
Oh,
and so
interesting.
You check off all these things because they're going to build a team that has all of those aspects. And I don't have all of those aspects. I can't cook for anything. But I can be a leader. I can be a second in command. I can definitely fix motorcycles. And so it's team building, which is so interesting.
That's so cool.
In your projects, team building your projects, team building this organization or this and that. And so having those skills and taking a look objectively at like, what are all of our amazing talents? How do we leverage those strengths? How do we, manage those weaknesses or improve them? And what makes sense? How do we all do this together? How do we,
So tell me, so then from the business development standpoint, like what are you looking at now from a general growth and perhaps enhancement on the offering that you have? How are you looking to acquire potentially new clients, new projects? Like what does that look like for outreach? Is there anything that's happening like that, or is it still kind of like feeding being fed from inbound from the architecture and design community?
I think we've been really fortunate in that work has historically really walked in the door. And I'd like to point that to our level of engagement and our ability to do some really crazy creative designs. And at any scale, we do small things from removing a load-bearing wall in your house all the way to building the academic wood tower on the U of T campus, to the Leaf, Assiniboine in Winnipeg, one of the most fantastic structures, I don't know, in the world. And so...
Why don't you describe what the Leaf is?
Oh, it's a crazy structure, and Dave will expand on it more. But it's a wild cable-supported ETFE roof. I think I said that right, Dave. And it is just this. The design is drawn from the geometry, like nature, like leaves, and sort of that configuration of them, and using structure to represent that design aesthetic by having a spiral cable net as well as a radial cable net. And so you have this kind of beautiful geometry of things, and it's open now, and it just seems amazing. I haven't seen it in person, but it is a crazy, crazy design. And that is just sort of, we would have looked at that. We started it before my time at Blackwell, as I've only been there about 8 years. And to look at that project, and Blackwell was like, yeah, we want to try that. Whereas several other engineering companies might say, no, that's too risky.
Right.
And so, yeah, we were just like, wow, cool challenge. Let's go. And I love that. And so from a growth perspective, we've been talking a lot about the word growth. And for me, growing Blackwell, there's several different ways to look at it. For me, it's not growing in numbers. I'm not really interested in scaling Blackwell for selfish reasons and for just Blackwell reasons. I want to know everybody that I get to work with. I want to be able to sit down and have a conversation with them, talk about a structure, or be able to talk to them about here's what's going on through my head as CEO, and to be able to hold on to our agility and innovation at that smaller size, to be able to respond and engage and pass that our culture of engagement down. So growth to me right now is growth inwards, like looking at what Blackwell is and thinking about, well, we all have, every organization has challenges and things we can solve, or things that grew into a problem that we didn't think would be, and we're now designing solutions to some of those problems. And at our size right now, those fit. They might not be the right solution 10 years down the road if we're bigger or if we're smaller. But growth to me is really about being transparent about how our business works. So that everyone can be...
To who?
To everybody.
Okay.
Across Blackwell. So that you know how Blackwell works, so that you can use your good judgment to do great work and enable your peers. Those are our 3 values, and I'll talk about them all day long. Because to us, transparency allows you to engage at whatever you want to with that information, and it might shape your decisions you make when you're talking with a client, or when you're talking with a colleague or a student, or you're out in the world looking for opportunities for us or ways to give back. And so we've written some amazing memos that I'm really proud of. I know the leadership team is really proud of, but like, hey, here's the nuts and bolts of how Blackwell works. We know how structures work, but like, what about Blackwell? Like, what does our business look like? How do we ensure that we do have enough projects in the pipeline? How do we have enough money coming in to make sure that we can keep doing the stuff that we love? Where are we using that money to either further our interests or explore something new or different? Talking about these things as a guideline, and recognizing that the most important thing for us is really quality of work and success of the project, not necessarily profit driven at all. Sometimes I talk about it just boils down to like, we just want to do cool work. But recognizing there is a business, there's 60 people plus all their families, and wanting to make sure that they're well supported and appreciated, and have the chance to show up and do really crazy, hard, creative work and enjoy the rewards of that.
As you know it so far, what are some of the really interesting, innovative projects that you see coming forward that you're working on now? Are you allowed to talk about any of them?
I'm sure we have some NDAs on a couple of them,
Okay.
But we've got some really wild houses that were like full brand new builds that are really, really crazy designs, like different styles of architecture too, different levels of structural difficulty. We've always got some sculptures on the go. There was one that was just unveiled on Queen Street West at the MEC, which we can see from our office. This really cool creative sculpture that we work with several different communities on. As the structural engineer, the artist will design what it looks like, and we make sure that it stands up. So it's cool to walk by that every day and see something built.
I would say.
The Academic Wood Tower, as I mentioned, is being built on the U of T campus. It's amazing. Really, really cool project. Make sure you go for a stroll there. It sits right next door to the Gold Ring Athletic Center, which was another one of our designs with a really unique structural system in it. And lots of big community centers that are like architecturally interesting for sure. It's not like we really like to engage highly in the design side of things. We've got some cool prospects out in Nova Scotia, lots of work out there, New Brunswick, PEI, things in Ottawa or out west. We got work. We're kind of doing all sorts of things into the States too. Lots of different projects, and we get to work with amazing architects that are well known and newer architects that we want to be friends with. And help them build their practice too.
Yeah.
We love working with contractors who are highly engaged as well in the building side of things. We love showing up and helping build things. And there's been lots of times where I've gone to site and talked to the team and they're like, and I'm like, I drew a stupid detail. I'm sorry. Like, I'm really sorry. How can we make this better? What do you need? And so it's,
I will say to that point, so the podcast is a byproduct of Walden Homes where I work. Work with operations, and I work on our sales and our client engagement. I work with all of our partners and collaborators. And so I say all of this because, we have a really strong intent in wanting to celebrate what the design and architecture is and how it ties in with structural and mechanical. And actually in saying that, I would say the majority of the work that we have is largely with yourselves, with Blackwell, and has been for years. And so, actually just introduced you on a new project that we're going to be starting up next year. Yeah, and
you do like beautiful builds, yeah.
Yeah. So, and part of the excitement in saying that is that in our experience, and I can say this from our own perspective, and I know this because the guys everyone talks about it. The engagement that you get as a constructor working with a company that really wants to be able to put its best people in place and empower them and give them the opportunity to be able to communicate and think creatively to solve solutions that arise, because nothing is ever going to get built the exact way that it was designed. It doesn't always work.
No.
So to be able to engage in those conversations and come up with solutions to these problems as they arise, it has always been a pleasure in dealing with the company that you are so fond of now being at the helm of.
It's so cool.
And the people really make the difference. So to the point that you said about culture, the people that we've worked with there have always been really, really, really communicative.
Yeah.
I can't believe how many times I use the word really. But
we're just that good.
No, but it matters, because I think from a homeowner's perspective, they won't always appreciate and understand these details until you experience potentially something game-changing in your environment. And I will bring up now, when this, you have to understand, when you're listening to this episode, it will have been pre-recorded at a different time, but not literally more than just a couple of days ago, we just had one of the biggest floods in the city that put a lot of potential structures in jeopardy.
Absolutely.
Right?
For sure.
Like game-changing amounts of water.
Yeah. Wild.
The Canadian Insurance Bureau just said it was so far that they estimated it to be over $1 billion of damage in the city.
Gosh.
And that they're not even done counting yet. And because the claims are not even, anyhow, where I say all of that, okay, and I know that I'm ranting here, but the impact of the structure to the build will define whether or not that structure will be able to sustain itself through what was a massive storm that we just experienced and what will be an upcoming storm down the road. Mm-hmm. And that storm doesn't have to be something like water. It can be wind. Okay?
Ice, snow.
It can be snow.
The seismic activity. We're not super high seismic here.
Exactly.
And our codes are changing.
Yes.
Because the climate's changing.
Yeah.
And so our design requirements are becoming more intense, and which as engineers we are ethically obliged to hold up. Like, that's our stamp, that's our liability on the line. We have to make sure we follow design codes, and it results in larger members. It results in more complex structure in what would typically could be perceived as a more simple thing like a house. And your point around homeowners not necessarily appreciating the difficulty of structure is like, if you're going to appreciate anything, appreciate the structure. Like it's going to protect you and save you.
What's interesting though is that I really do think that not a lot of people understand that the structure is what allows you to have no ductwork, visible.
Yeah.
Right. And that means something in design.
And we got to coordinate on that.
Right.
Make sure that's the intent.
Exactly. And how is an HVAC run going to move through a piece of steel?
Yeah.
That has to be there for the structure to be able to sustain
so
the
we
loads.
design that hole that goes through that steel in advance. So when I'm doing like preliminary layouts and everything, I'm looking at, okay, where's the bathroom? Where's this? What's my structural system look like? And I'm going to lay out my joists that allow you to have those runs easier instead of having to cut through all of them. So it's those small things, thinking about the practicality of the build, which really matters and makes your life easier and subsequently our lives easier and the owner's lives easier. That idea of total collaboration, transparency, clarity, communication with each other, just it's like playing jazz. It's like it moves and changes, and rolling with it can create some really beautiful music. And to see something be built is awesome, just really, really awesome.
I was just actually saying this to an architect yesterday, where when you go through, sometimes when you go through a pricing model and someone realizes that something is slightly unaffordable and so they want to go through a redesign, one of the biggest challenges as an architect is to design something and then realize that it's beyond the means of the financial means of the prospective client, and having to go and redesign it and not getting to build it. But then one of the great successes of that world is when you do hit the mark and the structure hits the mark and the moving truck shows up and the people move in, and everything that was laid out on computer, everything that was printed off onto paper for review on site becomes something livable and enjoyable, and the mechanical system works well because it was well thought into how it introduced itself into the structure.
Yeah.
And you're smiling a little bit right now as we talk about all of this, because the reality is that the structural element of the built environment is probably the most vital of all the elements.
Yeah, you got nothing if you don't have any bones.
Right? So like imagine your body with no bones.
Yeah.
Exactly. Like I can't believe I'm going to reference this. But I can think of the original X-Men movie when that guy turned do you remember what I'm talking about?
No.
Okay, and if anyone's listening to this and this goes over your head, I apologize. Okay, this is the nerd in me, but
I love it.
Like there's a scene in the original X-Men movie where a guy comes out of the water and he had been turned into a mutant
or something,
and like his body essentially just kind of like flops into a puddle of water and he turns into nothing.
That's what a building would be,
because that's what the building would be without the bone. Yeah.
So make sure you pay your structural engineers.
Yeah. And I will tell you that no matter if there's a price to a structural engineer and it seems lofty, well, you know what? they're designing something to ensure that when you go to jump down on your bed at the end of a long, busy day, or getting back from a work trip, or your kids jump on your bed to get you out of bed, that floor doesn't fall through. That floor system doesn't fall through because they've put some thought into it.
Yeah, and the other piece is we know our fees aren't that big relative to the entire project. So if we can put more effort in upfront in the design and in influencing the architectural vision as reasonably as we can too, to save money, to make a small move that might really save a lot of money down the road, that forethought will save you big dollars on the building side of things. So having a good engineer involved in any of the systems really can save you a lot of money in construction, which is where the budgets can really start to run away.
Yeah.
So building that team up front that has your back as an owner, super important.
Yeah.
Yeah. And as a contractor too, right? We want to draw details that make good sense to you, and it helps us learn too. People on site have so much knowledge that we're not taught in school. So I often, if I'm mentoring some younger people, it's like, go talk to the contractors. Hey, how did that work for you? Was this like, it felt pretty heavy handed. Would you get some feedback, because you'll learn immensely. You will learn immensely from going to site and seeing your ridiculous detail being built and recognizing, oh, that was not great.
And I'll say this: if you're a person listening to this and you're in school and you're contemplating a career in structural engineering, to what Brooke had just said, and again, I am not a structural engineer. I have no stamp. There's nothing in me that suggests it. But where I'm going to go with this is, School is an incredible opportunity to be able to get the education, but you're paying for it. Don't forget that you're paying, and I'm sure if you have student loans, you know that you're paying for it.
Yeah.
But when you get the opportunity to go into the workforce, don't forget that now you're getting paid to learn. Take the opportunities when you're being paid and learn all that you can from all the people that exist in this environment that you've now been engaged with or into, and ask questions and be a fly on the wall and learn, because you never know when a company might be looking to completely change its platform and say, we want to have someone in as the CEO, and you might not think that you have what it takes. Mm-hmm. And then all of a sudden that position is created, things fell into place in advance. And the next thing you know, you're 38 years old and you're running Blackwell structural engineering.
Yeah. You just have to have the courage to
believe in yourself.
Try. Yeah.
Believe in yourself.
Just to say yes.
Yeah. Take the chance.
Yeah.
Get on the bike. Go figure it out.
Yeah. And help make something that you love go even better if you can.
Yeah. Brooke, I will say to you that I appreciate you coming in, taking time out of your day. I say this with everyone, but I'll say it again. I work at Walden. We are strong advocates of the idea of collaboration and empowering the people that design everything that they have to get built to the best of its ability to be built. And so I really appreciate all that you have done so far with the company. I have heard from others that they also appreciate it. And we look forward to continuing to work together. Thanks again for everything. Thanks for coming.
Beautiful. Thank you, Jonathan. Sharing different perspectives in this industry is so meaningful. And I love to see it.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks.